the Munster Hurling League, Tipperary had been beaten last week by Waterford, but had a 222 to 20 points win over Clare inside Nana, abroad in McDonough Park. Just to go through who did some of the scoring. Grode O'Connor, he scored 8 points, one of those from play. Jake Morris scored a point, 1-2 penalties. Sean Ryan scored 1-1. Conor Stapleton scored a couple of points as well. For Clare, Peter Duggan, he scored 5, a point coming from a penalty. Mark Rogers scored 3, and Robin Mounsey scored 4 points. So a couple of other players pitching in as well. So I think it's kind of important for Tipperary and Cahill, because it's Cahill's first win as Tipperary manager. His last win was April 17th last year against Tipperary and Munster. And Tipperary's last competitive victory, if you can call the Munster Hurling League a competitive fixture, was against Antrim last March. So, yeah, you can say that these are meaningless competitions if you like. But number one, the performance was encouraging. And number two, it is good to get a win on the board, even if it is a somewhat experimental Clare team.
100%. And like as I said about crowds earlier, decent crowd turned up in McDonough Park to see Tip on home soil for their first game, and see Liam Cahill and co playing on home soil in their first, or managing on home soil for the first time. And they got the result they wanted. I'd say more importantly, whatever about the result. And when you look at how many days it had been since a win, the result probably was important. But the performance was far more encouraging, I would say. The bits I saw of it anyway, the speed on show, the athleticism on show, the work rate on show, I'd say too, breaking the lines. I think it was Alan Tynan went through for that goal, broke a couple of tackles, offloaded it lovely, and, a beautiful finish as well. But probably not something that we have seen it with Tip in the last couple of years, maybe that type of direct, strong running. So that was definitely one encouraging aspect from the highlights I saw.
Well, you think about it, he's a rugby player. He's used to running these direct lines and trying to cut through traffic and make breaks. So and in some ways you'd think, okay, he's maybe 5'10" or something like that. And the thing these days is to have big monsters, if you can, 6'5", 6'4" players like you'd see regularly in the Limerick team. So he's not huge. But if you're a sort of lad who can get in behind the opposition, then that's very important. So he set up that goal for, and he waited. You know the way in rugby they sort of say, fix the man before so he obviously taken him out of the play and then gave a lovely switch hand pass in for Sean Ryan, who finished very, very well. So he's been playing very well for Templederry the last couple of years. So Alan Tynan looks a real positive at the moment. Sean Ryan does. As we see in a comment here from, let me just find it. There's a comment from somebody talking about Michael Breen, I should say. Liam Manton here says, Michael Breen looks the part at full-back for Tipperary. Interestingly, Seamus Kennedy was named at wing forward. So, to me, Seamus Kennedy's a brilliant athlete. He's obviously got the footballer mindset, as well as being a great hurler, but he's got the footballer mindset. He's able to carry the ball at pace. So you might get an idea of what they're trying to get from him. Because, at the start of the year, you might have thought Michael Breen would play wing forward and maybe Seamus Kennedy would be in full-back, but kind of the other way around. And there's plenty of other positives there. Jake Morris winning 2 penalties. I mean, that's obviously a bit of a positive. Grode O'Connor is coming on a little bit. But 15 whites for Clare. So obviously they left a bit behind them. They underperformed to some degree. And there are a lot of new enough players getting game time. Diarmuid Ryan came on. Looks massive. I don't know, when you're looking at that clip of him popping over one of the points, he looks like he's physically filling out that bit more again. Clare aren't going to be too bothered by this.
No, definitely not. And we said it on Thursday's show. The benefit of Tipperary having a game under their belt, you can do all the training you want, but that bit of, that getting through that heavy ground, playing a game against Waterford the other night, and I know it wasn't all the same personnel that togged out again, but there was a decent few of them. And in horse racing parlance, they would have come on for the run an awful lot. You have that under your belt, and it would have helped an awful lot. The Kennedy one at wing forward is interesting. I would totally reserve judgment on that until you see them against, in a league game maybe. But Paddy Deegan was wing forward for Kilkenny yesterday as well, which I thought was interesting. And he spent most of the game coming back into the half-back line, and John Donnelly was playing centre forward, did something similar as well. It was really about nearly being extra defenders when they didn't have the ball, which I thought was interesting. So that's something that Derek Ling is obviously looking at, and it's something that Liam Cahill is looking at with Seamus Kennedy too.
Did you notice much in games that you watched over the weekend? Now, I was in at Dublin Antrim, and we'll come to that a little bit later, but teams playing regularly enough with maybe 13 players in their own half when they're defending. And I mean both teams at times doing that.
Yeah, Kilkenny did that regular enough. There was definitely definitely remained. Billy Dredden stayed inside. There was probably one more inside, but a lot of the time there was no half forward line. There was nearly no midfield. The midfielders were nearly half backs. The half forwards were all the way back. Yeah, and that's the way a lot of the time. And if you are able to cause a turnover, hoover up a bit of possession, work a couple of quick passes, bang, there's a load of space inside. But that's kind of the way it's going now, isn't it? Again, probably starting to mirror football a bit to some point, but obviously you can move the ball a lot quicker in hurling, so there's even more advantages if you can turn the ball over or get quick puck outs or whatever into that space that's created.
Yeah, that's where you need players who are very good in the transition and good at kind of breaking lines and running at pace. So and also players who are, if they're operating a little bit deeper and you do win a turnover, that they're clever with the ball, that they don't just turn it up and blast it aimlessly, that they're looking for someone off their shoulder who's coming and changing the angle.
Just on that as well, and it's maybe because we're high up, we can see it a lot more, but particularly inexperienced players or maybe more old school players who are struggling to adapt to that. You know, when you get a ball in traffic, like you need to turn away from the traffic. You know, could be 12 bodies on the sideline in front of us when a ball breaks there. If you're able to win the ball, you pop it back, you probably work it to the far side where there's a load of space. But the worst thing you can see happening with some players is, particularly players who aren't maybe au fait with how the manager wants them to play, they turn back into traffic and they get turned over themselves again. But it's the easiest thing to do, just to go look for where the traffic is, but you're almost looking for the space now. And that's where Limerick do it really, really well. They get the ball, they transition, really quick stick pass. All of a sudden it's over the far corner into Galan or into Peter Casey or whoever it is. But yeah, it's definitely teams adopting that more defensive approach. It's definitely been seen in a couple of games I watched anyway.
Yeah, so get your comments in while we're still talking about Tipperary and Clare. What did you see from both teams that you liked or didn't like? Ian O'Donovan says, great to see the service the forwards were getting yesterday for Tip. Also great to see the honesty of effort from all the panel, a real Tipperary of old. If we replicate that week in, week out. Also, Liam is bringing back what Tipperary were always famed for, a bit of dog, a bit of attrition, and above all, work rate, which has deserted us of late. Great to see an energetic-looking Tip team.
According to you, Shane, Tip are just known for skill and nothing else.
Tipper back, that's all I'm saying. I did a poll yesterday, our Tip back. Yes, but more yes. And it was fairly 50-50. Ian adds that only area for improvement for me was on one or two occasions our halfbacks were sucked up the field or down the field and didn't hold their zones. A strong Clare team would have exploited that. But one of the things that Tipperary needed was just that bit more structure. So, I mean, you think last year against Clare in the Munster Championship, how often was the team 2/3 of the team out past the 65. And I remember John Conlon was able to solo through for that goal chance earlier on, which was batted in on the rebound. Tipperary were all over the place, completely capitulated against Cork in the final game in Munster. I mean, you just can't have that. So there's signs that Liam Cahill's making a bit of an impact already. It wasn't brilliant against Waterford last Wednesday or Tuesday, was it? But still, it's improving. And Adrian McGrath, Clareman, says Tip don't have defensive options to afford Kennedy up front in the long run.
Well, given that they're without three defensive starters from last year, you would kind of have to, there'd be some credence to what Adrian has said, but maybe, I don't know, you just don't know. There's a lot of things, like Pádraig Walsh was wing back for Kilkenny yesterday, Paddy Deegan's up front. Like in a couple of weeks, would that still be the same? In a couple of weeks, when Tip maybe lose maybe another defensive option or something happens mid-game, will Kennedy have to go back into defence? We don't know, and I suppose you don't know the mentality or the mindset of management, whether they're just going with this and they're going with someone up front for the year or whether it's just a bit of an experiment. And I suppose, listen, that's what these competitions are for, the experiment, and see does something work, see does something stick.
Yeah, River Power says, Peter Duggan very lucky to get away with a very bad pull on O'Mara. O'Mara very lucky not to break an arm. Like a couple of years ago, he missed out on championship time because of a broken arm, so he'll be hoping that he doesn't get any more of those. He was black carded actually for dragging someone down for a penalty towards the end of the first half. Conor Bowe is really bulked up, says Liam Manton. The Clare half backline couldn't handle Garrod O'Connor under the high ball, says Ashley Bentley. There's a question there about Dublin. We'll come to that a little bit later on, and there's a few more. Keep the comments coming in. It's very, very early to be assuming Tipperary have multiple options at 3 and 6. They had no option at 3 last year. But as I've been saying for the last 6 or 7 years, Michael Breen is the obvious option.
Well, listen, I suppose when we're talking about defensive options, they've taken a number 10 or 12 or an 8 or 9 and moved it back to 3, and they've maybe swapped Seamus Kennedy up the other end. But it's going to be really interesting to see. That Breen does look like, I'd say that was a bit of a statement, and it does look like they're going to go with him there, barring like there's a couple of catastrophic moments or whatever. But he had played there a bit at underage, so, and he's fast enough that, you know, he could stay with Kyle Hayes to a fair degree, which very few other people would be able to do. He's good on the ball, big physical presence. You're only going to really know probably when there's two inside and there's a heap of space, which you hope there won't be in a big championship game. But he definitely has a lot of the assets for that position. I suppose the dark arts and things like that, when you've been a forward all your life, it'd be interesting to see, you know, the little tug here or there, you know, been cute in those kind of situations, because it's dog eat dog when you're inside and you have to do whatever it takes to survive. So it'd be interesting to see if Michael Breen adapts to that.
Do you want to go through some of what Liam Cahill said afterwards?
Yeah, sure he will. So he had a couple of things to say, even about the strong home support. He just said, delighted to see the big Tip following out today. Absolutely thrilled to see the Tip people back supporting the lads again. He corrected himself fairly quickly. Not that they ever didn't support him. So if he hadn't put that in at the end, people would nearly be saying that he was having a go at the Tip support, who maybe didn't come out in big numbers last year. And he just said about John McGrath possibly playing a part this year. So I think it's kind of had been broadly assumed maybe that McGrath would be under pressure maybe to play this year. But I don't know about you, when I saw him listed on the squad for the year, I kind of thought, obviously they think he's going to see some action here. But Carl said he'd have a chance. He's progressing nicely. John has a lot of work put in. That was a fairly horrific injury he got, but he's on the mend and on the way back. Like, an Achilles injury is a career ender. For, you know, I know a lot of track and field athletes, you rupture your Achilles and you're gone because you've lost that kind of bounce. He didn't totally rule out Barry Heffernan and Craig Morgan, I think, from featuring, but I think both are very unlikely. Both happened. They both got injured during club action. Time, it's just not enough. Like, 6 months would be like the very, very, very minimum. 9 months would be standard, and a lot of guys take maybe up to about a year. So I can't see them featuring.
Yeah, I think Heffernan's happened that bit earlier in the summer than Morgan's. It would be very, very difficult to imagine Morgan would get back. But they're definitely two of Tipperary's best six backs, so it's a big blow. Harburn, 6 with a bit of a sneer at me. Looking forward to seeing the Saints name in the programme as selector for Tip. Breen full back, his first move. Whatever about Tip winning the All-Ireland already this year, but Shane still hasn't shaved the beard. Now, to be fair, Michael, I was going to do it this morning.
Well, you were going to do it after I told you had to do it. You weren't going to do it independently. Like, you know, when you lose a bet, you back up whatever the stakes were in the bet. I'm just glad there wasn't money involved, and I'm not like waiting to get bread on my table or something, because I'd probably still be waiting and I'd be starving. But that has to happen soon.
Yeah, well, look, I don't actually have a razor, because I just used the electric razor for years. But I went down to do it. You know, there was good fate involved. I'd forgotten about it. There was good fate, and then I realised near a razor. But I will do it. Adrian McGrath says, I agree. Ari Breen. Verney is wrong. Tip has spent 6 years playing a 3 at 10, not the other way around.
Well, I'm not sure what he's trying to say. So
do you see Breen as naturally a fullback who was put up the field, or do you...
I honestly, Shane, you've probably seen more of him. I haven't seen enough of him. I tell you what, he's a natural score taker when he's on the ball. So there definitely is an attacking edge. I'm not going to be smart. You would have seen more of him at underage level and maybe seen him play in the backs. So I've never seen him play in the backs before. So I can't really say that. He's a natural 3, or that he was always a 3 or a tailor-made 3. That remains to be seen from my point of view, because I just don't have enough prior knowledge of him playing in the backs.
Yeah, Tip need Ronan out in the half back line so that he can score. He's wasted at full back. Well, I'd be concerned if whoever's in the half back line is taking on too many shots, because, you know, nothing kind of gets my goat more than shots from 100 yards. Grand having 1 or 2 if you're on your own, but not too many, please. Shane, buy him a loaf of brioche to keep him sweet.
There was a bit of a kind of a, it's not a metaphor or whatever, but obviously brioche is very sweet.
Yeah.